Hi guys, I hope you guys are doing well. This is James from Divine Crochet. Welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I'm going to give you guys a tutorial for this oversized striped V-neck crochet jumper. I just wanted a cute oversized jumper because I feel like a lot of the stuff that I make is quite tight, and whilst in summer that's great, in winter that's not 100% the vibes. Just wanted something really cute, really baggy and really flowy and drapey because I don't really like the look of oversized clothes that are super thick. If I have oversized clothes, I want them to be kind of thin and a little bit meshy. For this video, I'm just going to go through the process of me making it. I'm not going to make this intro too long just because I imagine this video is going to be quite long. Without any further ado though, we'll get into the tutorial. So before we get into the actual tutorial, I want to give a stitch tutorial on this V-stitch, which I do a little bit differently for this jumper. Starting with a slip knot, what we're going to do is we're going to chain a length which is going to be an odd number. So you can pick any number, it just has to be odd. Then counting from your hook, you want to count 4 chain stitches and work a double crochet into the 5th chain stitch. Then normally in a V-stitch, after we've done this double crochet, we would chain 1, but we're just going to go ahead and do a double crochet straight away, before then skipping a stitch in our chain row and doing a double crochet into that stitch, before we then want to do another double crochet into the exact same stitch. So you'll work in 2 double crochets into every second stitch, and once you reach your final 2 chain stitches, you're going to skip a stitch and just work 1 double crochet into that final stitch. And now you can see we've created the start of what are going to be these little V's. So to continue the pattern, we're going to chain 2 and turn our work. And then straight away, we're going to find the space in between the 2 double crochets that were worked into the same stitch. And we're going to work those 2 double crochets in between these 2 stitches. Your pattern from now on is just going to be doing those 2 double crochets in between the 2 double crochets in the row below. And once you've reached the end of your row, you should be finishing it off with a double crochet, and that should be into your turning chain. Having these double crochets or chain to either side of this stitch panel is just going to make things easier to sew in later on. And then from here, we're just going to repeat the pattern of chaining 2, turning our work, and then doing those clusters of 2 double crochets, making sure we're not adding in that chain like a normal V-stitch does, before then working a double crochet into your final stitch, which should be the turning chain. And you just want to build up your rows like this, and this is going to be the V-stitch that we use for this tutorial. So now we've gone through the stitch that we're going to use for this jumper, we're ready to start actually constructing this jumper. So I'm going to crochet from the bottom up, so I need to start by chaining the length of how wide I want my jumper to be. Making sure this number is an odd number, we're then ready to skip those 4 stitches and do the pattern of 2 double crochets into 1 stitch, skip a stitch, 2 double crochets into 1 stitch, and carry on. You can probably already start to see that this stitch looks a little bit different when you use a smaller yarn size and a bigger hook size. This is going to be what creates that mesh draped kind of look. For a project like this, you just want to make sure that your tension isn't too tight, and we're just going to work up our stitches as usual, and I want to build up a total of 14 of these rows of V-stitches. It's at this point that I can cut my yarn and finish off this colour and introduce my new colour. I've decided to do stripes consisting of black and white, but obviously this is 100% up to personal preference. To join your new colour, you're going to insert your yarn through the last double crochet that you did, and then get a slip knot around your hook and tighten it. And then what we're going to do is pull that through. Then before we start our pattern, I'm going to yarn over and pull through and then tighten that to make a tight knot.
I like to do these with stitches where my hook size is a lot bigger than my recommended hook size for the yarn that I'm using. But from here you can just continue by chaining 2 and continuing the pattern of doing those 2 double crochets in between the 2 cluster of double crochets in the row below, working your way along that row till you reach the end, and your final double crochet should be into your turning chain. And just like with the black, you want to do 14 rows of this before then changing your colour back to the colour you started with.
So it's a few days later and I ended up finishing the panel at my boyfriend's, so I've done about 3.5 stripes now. And it's at this point that I want to start adding my V-neck in, and to be honest with you guys, I do not have a plan as to how I'm going to do this. All I know is I want the V-neck to start at this point, and the first step to adding this collar is going to be to find your center stitch, which within this panel is either going to be in between the cluster 2 of double crochets or in between 2 of the clusters. So I'm going to find that, put a stitch marker there, and then I'm just going to go off and do one side by myself so I can come up with a plan, and then I'll share the design with you guys.
When it comes to my panel, my center stitch is going to be in between the cluster. So what I'm going to do is already I'll get rid of 1 double crochet either side of this midpoint, and I'm going to start my work in the other double crochet, if that makes sense. So just joining how we normally do, where you would insert your hook, get a slip knot, tighten it and pull it through. What I'm going to do is just do this first row as normal, as I've already skipped one of the stitches in the middle, so I don't need to do anything in the rows. But then next row, when we work our way back across, we need to get rid of one of these double crochets. So I'm just going to insert 1 double crochet into the V-stitch and 1 double crochet into the turning chain. So effectively what we're going to be doing to get rid of 1 double crochet each row is take off 1 double crochet from the cluster of 2 and work straight into the turning chain. Then in our next row we will discount the singular double crochet we did in the cluster and go straight ahead into those clusters of 2. So I'm just getting rid of the double crochet that's next to the turning chain in each row. So you will alternate between reducing your cluster of 2 double crochets to a cluster of 1 into the cluster of 2 double crochets, and then completely discounting this singular double crochet by working into the next cluster of 2 next to it. Also, while doing these decreases, make sure that you're remembering to switch your yarn every 14 rows, and what you're going to do is continue these decreases up until you're happy with how wide your collar is, and then you can just work some stitches straight up to finish off your neckline. Now you can mirror this pattern to make a back panel. I decided to make my collar a little bit higher and still include some decreases, but you just want to make sure that the amount of stitches either side of the collar is the same. It's at this point that you can attach either side of the collar of your front and back panel, and for me, I just continue crocheting. So what I'll do is just a row of single crochets to connect either side. For me, I like to crochet together my garments just because there's something a little bit more sturdy for me to sew my ends into. But if you want to, you could just sew these 2 together.
Now I've finished attaching my front and back panel together, I can try it on just to kind of see how it's fitting at the moment. Obviously at this point I can also mark out where I want my sleeves to go, so I'm going to do that right now.
My sleeve will span from the bottom of either one of these white stripes, so I start by chaining 2 at the first row, and then in the next row up I'm going to do my cluster of 2 double crochets. And then I'm going to skip a row and work my next cluster into the second row up. But really you have an option here of either separately making this panel or casting on a row in whichever way feels natural for your piece. That's just what I'm doing here at this moment. How you cast on this row isn't that important, you just want to make sure that the row that you're casting on isn't bunching up your fabric or stretching it out. Also, when I work my stitches into where I crocheted my panels together, I make sure I put my hook through both of the panels just to make things look nice and even. But from now on, what we're going to do is just build up the row in the exact same way, where we chain 2, turn our work, and just work up our panel, adding no increases or decreases up until we reach the length of sleeve that we're happy with.
So it's the next day. I was going to try and add more than 3 rows, which is all I kind of got done, but I don't really want to play yarn chicken at the moment. And then I also don't really want to go to the yarn shop. I don't know, you know when you just want to get a project done? Like, I am going to buy this yarn again. It's like one of my staple yarns, but I don't know, I just don't want to go at the moment. I just want to finish this jumper, so we're going to make it work. I have left quite a lot of yarn, but I might be playing yarn chicken. We'll definitely see about that. If you've watched this channel for a while, you know that I really hate sewing, so I do crochet a lot of my clothes together, but obviously with something like this you could go ahead and just sew the sides together. It's definitely up to you. I just think doing single crochets to crochet a side together just makes things look neater because you're creating a symmetrical neat seam. I don't know, it's definitely me being pedantic, but it is my personal preference, so don't think that you have to single crochet the sides together. Obviously do whatever you feel. Anyway, enough of me chatting, we'll get on with that.
I've started by folding my jumper in half and switching out my hook size for something slightly smaller, which is going to be a 3.5. I could have even gone down to a 3mm though. And now what I'm going to do is, continuing from where I finished everything off, I'm going to get a loop and start by doing a single crochet, and what we're going to be doing is 2 single crochets around both of the stitches either side of the panel. So this is going to be a double crochet and a turning chain of 2, and you want to make sure that you're doing 2 single crochets around each of them. I ended up having to play yarn chicken because I actually did run out of yarn despite my efforts to try and make things even. I weighed out my yarn to try and make sure both of the skeins were the same, and one was slightly bigger than the other, so I managed to finish one seam and not the other, so I decided to magic knot these 2 together. And I'm just going to share out this yarn between the 2 seams. This would just mean that I have a little open bit at the bottom, which I'm not too mad at, to be honest. I actually think it's going to be quite cute.
So after some, let's say, technical difficulties, it's all done and attached together. I managed to go down 6 rows on the final stripe, which means that I have 7 rows that aren't attached at the bottom. Just for my own sanity, I'm going to say that that's a design choice. I'm going to see how it looks in once I've sewn everything in, because I can always go attach it some other way, or I was even thinking about adding a row of single crochets around the whole of the bottom. If I do that, I'll do that right at the end. Honestly, the only steps after I've sewn in my ends that I want to do is I just want to add a few rows, or maybe just one row, I haven't quite decided, of stitches around the collar. I'm going to leave it without ribbing. That's just kind of how I want this jumper to look. In my turtleneck tutorial though, I do have quite a detailed section on how to attach ribbing, so I'll link that video down below if you guys want to attach ribbing, because you would do it in the same fashion that I did in that video. So yeah, I'm gonna sew in all of my ends and then I'll come back to finish off the collar and then I should be done. But as I say, I'm gonna see how it all looks at the end. So it's been about a week since I last updated you guys. I've been spending this last week just on and off sewing in ends. Normally I muster up the courage to just do all of my ends in one sit-in, but that didn't happen this week. So far I've done all of my ends apart from the ends around the collar. This is just because I want something a little bit sturdier to sew my ends into. So for the moment I think I might just be doing a row of single crochets just going around the collar. I will do that, and if I like the way it looks I'll finish off and show you guys, but if I end up adding something else obviously I will update you.
So after playing around with some ideas, I decided to just do that row of single crochets, and along the back what I would do is I would do 2 single crochets in between the V's and 1 within the V, and then traveling up and down the sides I would do 2 single crochets into each row, And then when it came to the middle V part of my V-neck, I just did one single crochet into the cluster, one in between the cluster, and then one into the next cluster before then working up the other side. And that's going to be my jumper done. Obviously I could go ahead and add a bunch of things to this jumper, but for this jumper I decided I just want to keep it nice and simple, and it's going to be the perfect piece for winter now for layering. And obviously because I used cotton and it's quite breathable, it's going to be wearable in summer as well. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please make sure you like, comment and subscribe. I'm going to leave all of my extra social media links down below if you guys want to see more content. I hope I will see you in the next video. Make sure you have a good rest of your day. Goodbye.